Picture this. You haven't eaten in 2 days. You found fresh tracks yesterday. You know exactly where the herd moved. The plan is set in your head, and then the sky opens up. Not a light shower, a hard, cold, relentless rain that doesn't let up for hours. Then a full day, then into the next night. Now you can't hunt. The tracks are gone, washed into mud. Bare feet on slick rock means a sprained ankle. And out here, a sprained ankle can be a death sentence. The nearby stream is rising fast. And the fire, the one thing standing between you and the cold, the dark, and every predator in the area, is struggling to stay lit. You are not bored, you are trapped. For most of human history, a long rainstorm wasn't a mild inconvenience. It was one of the most dangerous situations a person could face. And it's worth asking what ancient people actually did when they were stuck like this, because the answer might explain more about how we became human than almost anything else in the archaeological record. Today, rain means closing a window and reaching for a blanket. It's cozy. It's background noise for falling asleep. 50,000 years ago, that same sound outside a cave entrance could threaten your life in several different ways at once. The first threat was cold. A wet body loses heat dramatically faster than a dry one. Without waterproof clothing or shelter, a prolonged storm, even in a moderately cool climate, could push a person toward dangerous hypothermia within a matter of hours, especially overnight. The second threat was flooding. Many of the caves and rock shelters early humans relied on sat near rivers or at the base of hills, exactly the kind of terrain prone to flash floods. Archaeologists have identified layers of flood sediment inside occupied cave sites, evidence that water surged in while people were actually living there. Some of those layers mark the last time a site was ever used. The third threat, and maybe the most unnerving, was other animals. Heavy rain pushed predators toward shelter too, sometimes the very shelter humans were using. At several South African cave sites, researchers have found human remains alongside the remains of large cats, including skulls bearing puncture marks consistent with big cat bites. Rain didn't just make the outside world hostile. It pushed predators, prey, and people into the same small dry spaces at the same time. In the middle of all this danger, one task outweighed everything else: keeping the fire alive. Here's why that mattered so much. Archaeological evidence for controlled fire use goes back hundreds of thousands of years, but reliably starting a fire from nothing is a very different skill from maintaining one that's already burning, and for much of prehistory, that second skill may not have been common. If a fire went out during a storm, a group might not be able to relight it at all. Some groups solved this by transporting embers, wrapped in green leaves or packed into a type of fungus capable of smoldering for hours, essentially an early fire preservation kit. We have direct physical proof this mattered. Otzi, the roughly 5,000-year-old mummified man discovered in the Alps, was found carrying a complete fire-starting kit: fungus, tinder, flint, a striking material, and backup kindling. Even thousands of years later, losing a fire was serious enough that people carried dedicated tools to prevent it. So, when the rain came, protecting the fire came before almost everything else. Moving it deeper into shelter, shielding it from wind and drips, feeding it carefully with dry wood pulled from the sheltered underside of branches or the dry interior of a split log. Certain tree barks, notably birch, contain natural compounds that let them burn even when damp, making them valuable emergency kindling. In many groups, tending the fire through a storm may have been someone's entire job for hours at a stretch, because that fire meant warmth, light, protection, cooked food, and the center of all social life. Letting it die wasn't carelessness. It could be fatal for the whole group. So the fire is protected, everyone is mostly dry, but nobody can go outside. What did people actually do with that time? They made things. Cave sites across the world are dense with evidence of manufacturing, stone tools at every stage of production, concentrated piles of the tiny stone flakes produced while shaping tools, clustered exactly where someone would have sat near firelight working for hours. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered what looks like a 100,000-year-old pigment workshop, complete with shell containers used for mixing ochre. This wasn't improvised. It was a deliberate, repeatable process. Bone needles with tiny hand-drilled eyes start appearing in the archaeological record tens of thousands of years ago. Making one requires sitting still, focused, for a long stretch of time, exactly the kind of task a storm-bound day provides. Some of the most remarkable finds go even further. At a Neanderthal site in France, researchers identified a tiny fragment of twisted plant fiber, among the oldest known evidence of manufactured string. At another European cave site, archaeologists found an ivory tool, tens of thousands of years old, deliberately carved with holes and spiral grooves for twisting plant fibers into cord. Someone built a dedicated rope-making device. Cordage is slow, repetitive, patience-heavy work, ideal for a day when there's nowhere to go, and rope quietly underpins an enormous share of early technology. Better shelters, snares, hafted tools, bindings of every kind. People also worked on comfort itself. At Sibutu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found layers of carefully arranged plant bedding dating back over 70,000 years, including leaves from a plant with natural insect-repelling properties, periodically burned and replaced to keep it clean. This wasn't bare survival. It was someone deliberately making a shelter livable. Then there's the part of this story that goes beyond the practical. Art. Deep cave sites in France contain paintings tens of thousands of years old showing lions, horses, and other animals rendered with striking anatomical accuracy and a real sense of motion. Similar ancient figurative art has been found as far away as Indonesia. Crucially, much of this art sits deep inside cave systems, well past the entrances where people would naturally shelter, reachable only by carrying a lamp through narrow, pitch-black passages. Nobody does that on a good day with hunting to do. It fits far more naturally into a stretch of enforced, restless downtime, once the tools were sharpened, and there was nothing left to do but go deeper and create. And time spent together indoors may have shaped something even bigger than art: culture itself. Anthropologist Polly Weissner's research among the Hawansi people of the Kalahari found a striking pattern. Daytime conversation tended to focus on practical matters, resources, disputes, logistics, while nighttime conversation around the fire shifted overwhelmingly towards stories, songs, and shared history. Firelight seemed to change what people were willing to talk about. That transmitted knowledge, where water holds refill, which plants are safe, how to track a particular animal, wasn't idle chatter. It was survival information passed directly from one mind to another. Layered on top of it were myths and explanations, including the rain stories nearly every human culture eventually develops, almost certainly first told by people sitting through the very weather those stories tried to explain. Some of that oral tradition proved remarkably durable. Certain Australian Aboriginal stories describe coastline changes that match sea level shifts from thousands of years ago, preserved not in writing but purely through repeated retelling across countless generations. That kind of cultural memory doesn't happen by accident. It requires exactly the kind of extended, forced togetherness that a long rain provides. And rain wasn't purely a threat. Once it passed, softened ground left extremely clear animal tracks, some of the best tracking conditions available. Rain filled natural stone basins with drinkable water near many known campsites. It brought mushrooms, made tubers easier to dig from softened soil, and triggered insect swarms rich in protein, a pattern some primates still exploit today after storms. So when it rained for days on end, ancient humans weren't idle. They protected the fire that kept them alive. They shaped tools for the next hunt. They twisted the cordage that held their shelters and gear together. They ground pigment for paintings made deep underground. And they told the stories that carried practical knowledge and eventually meaning itself from one generation to the next. When the storm finally broke, they stepped out onto soft ground covered in perfect tracks, ready to hunt again. The rain hadn't cost them time. In a very real sense, it may have built the very foundations of human culture, one long, trapped, firelit day at a time.